Now that it's springtime, many people start to at least think about, if not actually, plant a garden, right? Plant a garden. Maybe it's a garden for flowers that are just beautiful to behold. Maybe it's a garden that will be for vegetables to eat and give us nourishment. But there's just something about a garden that's beautiful and peaceful and restful. And this came to mind when reading the gospel that we just heard, because gardens figure prominently. Our story tonight of the torture and the suffering and the death of Jesus begins in a garden. As Jesus and his disciples went out across the Kidron Valley, and there was a garden there, the garden we call Gethsemane. And if you were listening very carefully or reading carefully, Jesus' journey tonight of his passion ends in a garden. It says, "Now in the place where he had been crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb." And the journey from the first garden to the second garden is when darkness has its hour. That journey from the first garden to the second garden can only be accomplished by the cross. The journey from the first garden to the second garden can only be accomplished by the cross. It's that journey where Jesus obediently accepts what is going to happen to him through the worst of humans' capacity for sin. Christ's Good Friday journey that we just heard, from the Garden to Gethsemane to the Garden of the Tomb, is really a microcosm of the journey of human beings throughout all of salvation history. Why? Well, because human history, our history, also started in a garden. Remember, the Garden of Eden. And the end of our history, that too happens in a garden. At least we hope. At the end of our lives, right, we all hope to be reunited with God our Father in heaven. But what we call heaven is what Jesus calls paradise. It's very interesting. Jesus calls it paradise. If you remember in Luke's telling of the Passion, when the one revolutionary or thief on the cross repents and asks Jesus to remember him when he comes into his kingdom, what does Jesus tell him? "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." Paradise. It's a wonderful word. It's a word that comes from the Greek paradisios. And originally, it meant a walled garden, like an enclosed garden with a wall around it. And it was where, in ancient times, a king would bring his favored guests to come and sit and rest and be refreshed, safe from all harm and evil outside the walls. But just like Christ's journey today, the journey of human history from the Garden of Eden until where we hope to end up in this Garden of Paradise is just full of every kind of sin and suffering imaginable. But that's why Christ came, to open up the gates of paradise, to forgive our sins, and to show us how to bear our crosses the way he bore his cross, the unspeakable torture that he had to endure. And that cross is our way to the heavenly walled garden, to paradise. You know, pretty much all of us have our own Good Fridays, right? Times of suffering, sometimes unbelievably difficult suffering. The death of a parent, maybe, or of a spouse, or, God, even a child. The cancer diagnosis, the sickness, the aches, the pains, the loss of a job, the uncertainties of early youth, the loss of faculties and health as we get older and older, the rejection, our rejection by others, the betrayals, the times when no one will listen to us, the times when we feel so terribly alone. Those are the times to remember that Jesus knows exactly what we go through. We just read of his suffering, of his betrayal, of his rejection, of his hanging on the cross alone. These are the times to unite our Good Fridays with the Good Friday of Christ. That's why in our second reading we heard, it says, we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been similarly tested in every way, but without sin. This Good Friday, and all of our Good Fridays, are the times to remember that God desires all of us to be with him in paradise, in his restful, protected heavenly garden. Good Fridays are the time to remember that the cross is the way home to paradise.